This is Channel 7 Eyewitness News with John Drury and Marianne Childers, Steve Deshler's weather, Tim Weigel on sports, and the Eyewitness News team. This is Eyewitness News.
Good evening. A rare earthquake centered 25 miles west of Chicago rocked the LaGrange Hinsdale area tonight. The tremor, registered 3.0 on the Richter scale, rattled windows and caught residents by surprise. But as Paul Meinke reports, there was little serious damage.
You'd never guess, looking at Hinsdale this evening, that there was an earthquake here shortly after 5. There is little damage, but tonight a lot of talk among neighbors about a 5-second rumble that shook at least 7 southwestern suburbs. Police departments were flooded with calls from people wondering what happened. When it hit Hinsdale, quite a few thought train wreck.
All I could think of was that the train had jumped the tracks outside because the train was coming through at that exact same time. And it was as if the building had moved underneath, just shook for about a second in duration, and that was it. It was all over.
Mary Sabo and her young son were watching Sesame Street when the living room couch began to shake.
It was sort of a sudden jerk, and it wasn't heavy, wasn't a lot.
And then the house, you felt the house moving too?
I felt the house move a little bit, yes.
Down the road, Jurgen Mathis's house shook too. He had to jump from his chair and grab hold of a big cabinet that had started wobbling. Mathis's 90-year-old house is now wearing a half-dozen plaster cracks it didn't have earlier today. Mathis says the shaking was accompanied by a noise that sounded like a low growl.
I will never forget this sound coming to me out of this corner.
Damage overall appears to be very minor throughout the area. Glass display windows did a lot of shaking but no breaking, and employees at this video store had to spend a few minutes picking up tape cartons that fell to the floor during the quake. 16-year-old Jennifer Brabender was watching television tonight when her house started to shake and a bottle fell off a shelf, smacking her in the head. Jennifer's all right. She's just happy the bottle didn't break. And most everyone here is happy that this rare earthquake is being followed mostly by conversation and not cleanup. In Countryside, Paul Meinke, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Now, if you mention California, people expect to hear a lot about earthquakes, but here in the Chicago area, they're much more unusual. Yet, as Jay Levine tells us, there are some major fault lines that cross through the Midwest.
Are we being too complacent? Well, perhaps too complacent. In the past 30 years, researchers tell us there have been fewer than half a dozen measurable quakes in the immediate Chicago area. Tremors here are both rare and relatively mild. Downstate, it's another story.
Calling from Loyola University in Chicago, I gave you a time previously which was incorrect. It's actually 22:06:37.
This super-sensitive equipment is set on concrete foundations in the basement of Loyola's Northside Seismology Lab. At 5:06 this afternoon, it shook for barely 30 seconds. The quake not only short, but also confined to a small area.
Do no serious damage, but it might crack a little plaster or have a few pieces of china moved around or something of that sort. If you go from a 4 to a 5, one full number like that, the amount of energy released is 30 times more. So if you go from a 4 to a 6, it's 900 times greater.
In 1811, a quake measuring just over 8 created this 14-mile-long lake along the New Madrid Fault, which extends into southern Illinois. It permanently submerged trees and changed the course of the Mississippi River. A similar New Madrid quake today, a recent study says, would devastate Memphis, cause serious damage in St. Louis, and shake buildings as far away as Chicago.
We have no earthquake requirements in our code. No. Other sections of the country do, but Chicago has none.
Since most of the fault lines are located in southern Illinois, where minor earthquakes can occur several times a week, we've never really worried. But Father Roll says this is the second small disturbance to hit the western suburbs in the last 5 years.
I'm a little suspicious of this area because it's only the second time to my knowledge there has been an occurrence of this type in that particular region.
Of course, no one's suggesting that that's proof of a new fault line running through Chicago. Merely that predicting earthquakes is still an inexact science, and that today's tremors will surely provide new material for the Central States Earthquake Consortium, which for years has been trying to warn those making jokes about California that it could happen here as well. John, Marianne?
Thanks, Jay. Tremors of a different kind in Washington today. Faced with the threat of a major foreign policy defeat in Congress, President Reagan imposed a series of economic sanctions against the government of South Africa. Sanctions similar to those he threatened to veto, but not nearly as tough. While he denounced apartheid, the president said this was not a major policy change.
I'm signing today an executive order that will put in place a set of measures designed and aimed against the machinery of apartheid without indiscriminately punishing the people who are victims of that system.
Among other things, the sanctions limit sales of computer technology and loans by American banks to the South African government. Mr. Reagan also moved to halt import and sales of the South African Krugerrand. But many in Congress were critical.
We're not going to give up on this. There's not going to be an obfuscated statement by the United States of America on apartheid.
And there's bitter criticism from others.
It is an absolutely toothless American commitment of virtually no opposition to the practice of apartheid at all. And the South African government will be pleased, no doubt, that President Reagan remains a de facto ally of that vicious regime.
South African President Botha noted that the sanctions were less harmful than those proposed by Congress, but attacked them nonetheless, saying whatever the intention, the effect is punitive. It is a negative step. White House officials hope the president's actions will forestall passage of a sanctions bill that's already been approved by the House and is now pending before the Senate. And they say avoid the politically damaging prospect of an override of a presidential veto.
Marianne, Illinois Attorney General Neil Hartigan capped off his first day as a declared candidate for governor with a neighborhood block party tonight. Rogers Park is Hartigan's old neighborhood. Friends and family who call themselves Neighbors for Neil turned out to support the candidate. Earlier today, in a state fly-around, Hartigan attacked Governor Thompson's record. But it is fellow Democrat Adlai Stevenson whom Hartigan must first defeat.
We heard a lot of things being said. Jim Thompson said that Adlai Stevenson shouldn't be governor. Adlai Stevenson said that Jim Thompson shouldn't be governor. You know, I agree with both of them. I'll be the next governor of Illinois.
The Chicago Sun-Times poll shows Hartigan trailing Stevenson by 16 points. Hartigan says he's willing to address issues face-to-face with Adlai Stevenson, and he's asked the state Democratic Party to arrange debates across the state. Marianne?
Coming up next, Steve Dessner with a more fall-like forecast for us. And later, investigators turn their attention to the engine as they try to explain Friday's. Steve Dessner has the forecast, and I hope, Steve, a little relief from all this muggy stuff we've had lately.
Still getting over all those tremors earlier today. Boy, I'm telling you, it's something. Well, let's take a look at how things stand around the area today. We had a pretty pleasant high compared with the last couple of days. The weekend was blistering hot. And although today's high of 85 was above normal, it was nothing like the weekend, that's for sure. And the low so far has been 66. As far as the way things are right now, 68 degrees, west winds at 8. The barometer has been pretty much stable. Humidity stands at 73%. Temperatures are cooling down around the areas to our north, and because there's a sort of reinforcing push of cool air coming toward us, there are a couple of little sprinkles around, like places around like Glenview. They're going to travel through in the next couple of hours, giving us clearing skies and a return to drier air over the next couple of days. Down to our south, temperatures are still in the 70s and 80s. Pretty tough squall line passed through Indiana over the last several hours. Reports of some severe weather and some downed trees and power lines. Elsewhere, let's take a look around now at the current national scene. It shows the low traveling farther toward the east as it did that today. It dragged some cool air down behind it. That's what set off those showers and thunderstorms. It's still hot and muggy in the southeast as of now. Temperatures still in the 70s and 80s. Back behind all this, now down to the 50s and 60s, so there is cool stuff on the way for us. The forecast map is good news for a change for Tuesday. High pressure on the way across the Great Lakes. It will gradually shove its way toward the southeast. Notice in the border states, temperatures only in the 60s, but around here, there will be temperatures in the lower 70s or so, and some partly sunny skies as the day wears on. Meanwhile, for the eastern states, some quenching rain from the heat wave. Baltimore today was 98 degrees, and by tomorrow, there'll be a big cool-off with those cooling rains. Out west, there'll be some more showers and rains across the Rocky Mountain states, and a couple of showers as far to the south as around San Francisco. Here's the forecast then for us for tonight. Mainly cloudy skies, cooler. A couple of sprinkles here and there, or hither and yon, whichever. Northwest winds, low temperature 60. Tomorrow, some sunshine, much cooler, less humid. Northeast winds, high temperature 74. Tomorrow night, fair skies and pleasant weather. Northeast winds, low temperature 55. For the following day, Wednesday, sunshine, mild, east winds at 10 to 15. Easy to take. High temperature 75 degrees. Warming by the end of the week, but nowhere near as rotten as it was this week. And temperatures by Saturday around about the mid-80s.
Sounds good.
No earthquakes in the forecast? No earthquakes. Coming up next, the latest on the investigation of the crash of that DC-9 in Milwaukee, and 2 American journalists get caught in the crossfire in a bloody coup attempt in Thailand. Former government officials in Thailand staged a coup attempt today. They failed, but not before 4 people, including 2 NBC journalists, were killed. About 18 tanks and 500 troops under the direction of a former prime minister and 2 former military commanders surrounded a number of government buildings in Bangkok. There was gunfire and shelling, and caught in the crossfire, an NBC crew. His camera still rolling. NBC Bureau Chief Neil Davis died instantly. Sound man Bill Latch was wounded and died 6 hours later. The coup failed after the government refused commando units and rushed them into the city, and 2 of the coup's leaders were taken into custody. Marianne?
Tonight, John, federal investigators say they're still no closer to learning why a Midwest Express DC-9 crashed in Milwaukee on Friday, killing 31 people. They now know one engine definitely failed just a few seconds before the crash, but they say that alone could not have caused the disaster. Here's Chuck Gowdy with more.
National Transportation Safety investigators tonight are checking maintenance records for this engine, the right side unit from Midwest Express Flight 105. The engine was hoisted onto a truck today and transferred to a hangar here at Mitchell Field. Federal inspectors are now trying to figure out why the engine failed, scattering pieces of compressor blades and other parts over the runway before the plane twirled into a grove of trees.
What we would like to have seen is whether or not there's any outward penetration. In other words, any engine parts coming outward. It's impossible to tell with all that inward type of damage. We perhaps will be able to after a very careful examination, but that will be a slow, laborious, and detailed process.
The Midwest engine was an older model of an engine that caused this British jet to blow up and crash last month. Tonight, engine maker Pratt & Whitney says the JT-8D model is safe, and the 12,000 are now in use. The company says its engines are built to last 15 to 20 years. The engine on this plane was made 18 years ago. Tonight, Midwest's other 2 DC-9s are flying, along with a plane rented from another airline. Hearses this evening continue to pick up remains of the 31 victims. Several have yet to be identified. Midwest Express tonight continues to provide counseling for some relatives of the 31 crash victims. Consider the 28-year-old woman whose long-lost father died in the accident before she had a chance to meet him. Or the pilot of the downed jet who had a perfect flight record and a pregnant wife. Or the 33-year-old Wisconsin man who leaves a wife, a 3-year-old daughter, and a month-old son. The plane crashed less than a minute after takeoff. The trail from this tragedy is long and painful. In Milwaukee, Chuck Gowdy, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And Chuck tells us the examination of the right engine from Flight 105 could take as long as several months.
Some 18,000 New York children stayed home from school today as parents protested the city's decision to allow a second grader with AIDS to attend class. School officials said it was the lowest ever first-day attendance at 63 schools in 2 Queens districts. Dozens of parents and students protested outside the school, some carrying signs reading, "Better safe than sorry." As the protest raged, the state judge still refused to force the child who was born with AIDS to stay at home. The child, whose identity has not been released, has attended school for the past 2 years. In Chicago tonight, police say that street gangs are to blame for a shooting on the city's south side. 4 teenagers, all said to be gang members, were wounded when another youth allegedly opened fire on this playground. The gunman was riding his bicycle as he opened fire on the crowd. 3 victims are in good condition, another in fair condition at area hospitals. Police are looking for 2 possible suspects, but so far, no one's in custody.
Coming up next, in a one-on-one interview, Hugh Hefner explains what it means to him to return tonight to Chicago. And later, Pete Rose mania grips Cincinnati.
Playboy founder Hugh Hefner is in Chicago tonight doing research on a new autobiography. Hefner returned to his roots for a nostalgic look backward, but as Diane Burns reports, it was a changed Hugh Hefner who came to visit.
At 59, Hugh Hefner is a picture of energy, but it is quite a different picture from the past, even as he glided through one of his familiar, lavish parties tonight. He has shed his Playboy image. He's got one woman, no pipe, and no smoking jacket.
My priorities have changed. If one wants to live, and I do, as long and fulfilling a life as I possibly can, then one begins to take a little better care of oneself.
This is Hefner's first trip home since 1979, and he says it's never been sweeter because it's the first one to take him all the way down memory lane. Hefner relived his school days earlier today, beginning at his old elementary school, Sayre, in his old Northwest Side neighborhood. Even back then, he dabbed in a field that would earn his fortune.
My first serious publication was at Sayre Grammar School. It was called The Pepper. And I was in 6th grade, and I started a newspaper that lasted for a number of years there.
But it is perhaps sex that people think of most when they think of his magazine. He says that and sex have changed.
When I was growing up, sex was all sin and disease and repression. It will change again.
Hefner, too, has changed since a recent stroke.
Even that really is proven to be a stroke of luck, because it was an instance of the fate tapping me on the shoulder and getting me to pay attention to both the stress in my life and also the rate at which I was living my life. And as a result of that, I am healthier and happier now than in memory.
And Hef says you can't ask for more than that. Diane Burns, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
There have been rumors that Hefner might soon propose to girlfriend Carrie Lay, but the couple denies that they have any plans to tie the knot in the near future, in case anyone's interested, Marianne.
Coming up next, Tim Weigel with all the sports, including highlights of the Cubs, who try to play spoiler tonight in St. Louis. Well, it seems like the Bears figured if you're going to start off the season, start it off in a big way.
Marianne, more points were scored this weekend than any other weekend in NFL history, so that 38-28 Bear win over Tampa Bay, apparently not a fluke. But Mike Ditka gets ticked when you say, or the press suggests, that the Bear defense had an off day, and the offense had to pick up the slack. Well, like any good coach, Mike doesn't like to see any one of his units criticized, and besides, Mike's a lot of fun to watch and listen to when he's mad. Now, he certainly wasn't mad when Leslie Frazier turned the game around 2 plays into the third quarter with this interception. But frankly, the defense did have an off day, allowing 28 points. On the other hand, the offense scored more points than in any Bear opening game since 1948. But Ditka didn't want to hear that the offense was hot and the defense was not.
Wrapped up in offense, defense, this, that. It's a team. We're the Bears. And we're going to win and lose as the Bears. I don't want to hear all that other crap. And that's what we got to get out of our minds. If they play bad, we play good. If they play good, maybe we won't play so good. If the special teams play bad, somebody's got to play good. And they didn't play good early, but they made a play when they needed to.
Go get him, Mike. The Bears finally took the lead for good when Jim McMahon literally walked into the end zone in the fourth quarter. Had a great game, his first full game since he lacerated his kidney last year. And he didn't mind that his celebration cost the Bears a penalty. At today's press conference, he talked about the new head-knocking way of making whoopee.
That's something we started a year ago. Just, you know, it's fun. I like hitting people. I woke up this morning, couldn't figure out why the hell my neck hurt, and I realized it was all the headbutts we had yesterday.
Not too many of them out there, but they're getting into the Halloween mood. Then Gary Gaetti thumbed his nose at the Sox. He had 2 homers tonight, both of them in exactly the same spot. 3 homers overall off poor Floyd Bannister. The Sox got only 4 hits off John Butcher. Look at Steve Lombardozzi with a nice force play. Sox are shut out, but the Cubs have a much better chance. Steve Trout playing with a baseball there. Remember, Steve fell off his bicycle yesterday, but he's apparently okay. And so okay is Sean Dunston. Boy, what a great play to rob Terry Pendleton. Watch here. Only Vince Coleman's blinding speed manages to beat this one out. Dunston playing much better shortstop right now. And the Cubs playing better overall because they knocked the Cardinals off tonight. Keith Moreland knocked in Gary Matthews. The Cardinals, by losing, now fall into a first-place tie with the New York Mets, so the Cubs are the spoilers. Toronto and the Yankees keep pace with each other. The Yankees still a game and a half behind. Baltimore and Boston rained out. It was California beating Kansas City, and Oakland and Texas still going at it. Cincinnati beat San Diego. More on that in a minute. Los Angeles victorious in Houston over San Francisco. But Pete Rose in Cincinnati was much ado about nothing tonight because Pete warned the crowd he wouldn't go after Ty Cobb's career hit record tonight. True to his word, he didn't. He sat this one out when San Diego pitched left-hander Dave Dravecky. So Rose was content to guide his team to a 2-1 victory. Rose will try to go for Cobb's record tomorrow night. And ironically, the pitcher in that game will be Dewey Lamar Hoyt, who used to be with the White Sox. And I'm sure Lamar does not want to be the guy to surrender the record-breaking hit to Ty Cobb. If he did that, that would be history if he gave it.
What a way to get into the book. Well, let's all go home. Good night.
Good night.